Hey, what's up, everybody? I did a nice video interview with my friend Shreedar from Slack, and he talks all about Slack and what he does at Slack, and we talk a bit about the current crisis and what's going on, and just some nice topics. And we have a nice celebration at the end. He has a surprise to share with everybody. All right, so without further ado, let's jump right in. Yeah, so actually Slack is doing really well these days, right? So with the
Yeah,
crisis, everybody is working from home. We have now this new global remote culture, right?
yeah,
So, that's been crazy to see. And and I guess, like especially with Slack. So Stuart, the CEO of Slack, Stuart Butterfield, right? Uh,
Stuart Butterfield. Yeah,
yeah, so he's had some tweets that got a lot of attention.
totally. Yeah. So, talking about that, he made it like really clear and very transparent, and like how the entire Slack is responding to this new pandemic, and how are we feeling internally? Internally, how are we feeling about it?
Mhm.
And how it's a good opportunity in terms of scale for Slack, and how are we holding up with like millions and millions of users being active, um, not just daily but like per millisecond, and
That's
um,
right. You were saying that before, especially with data infrastructure and analytics, right? It could be like daily active users. So you said like 12 million daily active users was a good target. But these days, you've literally switched to checking like per the
second,
milliseconds, right?
yeah, per millisecond. That's how we like to call it.
Yeah.
um, and we had like one of these crazy Wednesdays wherein usually Wednesdays are typically slow,
Mm.
and after like a week or like couple weeks inside the lockdown, we really saw like more than ever traffic uh, being connected to Slack on a Wednesday.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a big deal.
All-time
Um,
highs in the traffic. Okay.
yeah, all-time highs in Wednesday traffic to be
Yeah, like Wednesday. So it's
precise.
interesting that Wednesday is the slow day. I
The
guess it's
thing
like
is,
hump day. People are like
yeah,
halfway
it's like
through the
no
week,
more
maybe.
Wednesdays.
Maybe they're working instead of chatting, or maybe they're just a bit slower. That's interesting.
It's usually work from homes on Wednesdays. That's what I've typically observed as a culture in Silicon Valley. Uh, People want to like really get psyched up on Mondays and Tuesdays, rest a bit on Wednesday, come back again on Thursday and make it like a full go until
Mhm.
Friday evening, and then they're off for a happy hour or like for a great weekend. So
Yeah.
that's how like the statistics have been for Slack on Wednesdays, essentially. And again, like we talked about, um, Slack going wall to wall for IBM and another giant company. That was another, I would say, cherry on top of all of this. What's happening in these conditions?
Yeah, I mean, those are like
Um,
huge, well-known companies, right? And tell
yeah,
us again what wall-to-wall means.
wall to wall essentially is if a particular company goes wall to wall, every other employee in that company, so every other employee in IBM would use Slack for team collaboration, talking to their colleagues, or like making announcements, anything that you would usually do on Slack. um, yeah,
That's
you
right. I
you just
mean,
go
yeah.
full blow with not only like every user using Slack, but like every set of features that Slack provides as a paid team, um, are being optimally used, I would say, by the company, which means which means wall to wall in that sense.
Yeah, that's
So yeah, so there were two companies that went wall to wall, and then we did a fairly good Q4, I guess. the revenues were up like by 49%.
That's a
The
big deal.
year-to-year revenue were up to like by 57, 59-ish percent. I don't really exactly know the numbers, but it's all public information. You could check on TechCrunch or any other media websites, and um, yeah, uh, it was a good way to show the analysts and like uh, um, 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 see be transparent about how we are doing in the COVID situation. And Stewart's tweet about this was like a really good reflection of like what I've talked about.
Right. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and like I guess the public opinion, is what's your take on it? Like, what do people think about Slack and so forth? You know, because Twitter's crazy. Everybody has every opinion there. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or musings about the public and what they think. Have you seen it?
Well, uh, internally, like we're feeling like being in the data team, I'm really feeling the heat in terms of scale, in terms of
That's right.
uh,
Things are growing quickly, right?
yeah, in
Yeah.
terms of like new channels being created, in terms of like new teams being created. Also, in the amount of in terms of in the amount of data that gets generated every week or every day.
Mhm.
I'm really seeing those numbers go high, and which is why um, the whole um, um, the whole Slack internally is um, really in high spirits, I would say.
Yeah, that's crazy. And
It's a good opportunity along with Zoom,
right, right.
and along with all SaaS companies, essentially DocuSign, Okta, and
Oh yeah.
Willio being in the same space as well.
And then you're mentioning all
It's
like
a good
public companies,
opportunity
for instance.
for, yeah,
So,
for
yeah, that's
yes,
right.
public companies essentially. It's a good opportunity. Also, one other thing is that we're also hiring actively in many spaces. So feel free to just for um, all of the audience for your channel, feel free to check out Slack's website and like um, 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 apply
Oh yeah,
online.
that's right. And we'll post some links to that as well. Because
Sure.
I know like it's crazy times, and so a lot of companies have actually been cutting back a little bit.
Hmm.
So I know many people are looking just for
Yeah.
different opportunities or to keep their mind open. So I think Slack is a great one, right? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
time, and it should be like this is one of those where it will grow like during this while remote work is a big deal, and that
Mhm.
growth should continue because once companies
Yeah.
make the investment to use Slack, I mean
Yeah.
kind of in for the long haul as well. So
Totally. Yeah.
it's great.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and then the final question, just to like get your take, Slack's been growing very well, and like Zoom and some other communication apps, right? Like for video call conferencing and so forth. And like
Yeah.
Slack has an integration with Zoom as well, so it
Yeah.
seems like it's a very interesting
Yeah.
ecosystem for
Yeah.
communication. But even like Amazon Web Services, I believe, has their own uh, chat service, I guess called Chime.
Yeah.
That's maybe smaller market share, but
Yeah.
um, there's been some news that came out that like maybe Amazon would look to acquire a
Yeah.
company such as Slack or Zoom. So I
Uh-huh.
just wondered, what's your take on that?
Well, there are no such talks internally about Amazon making any acquisitions, at least for
Okay.
Slack. I can't speak for Zoom though, but like all these stories are essentially what the analysts think about the market as a whole, or Silicon Valley as a whole, and how things have been in the past. For example, Microsoft and GitHub, or Microsoft and LinkedIn,
That's right.
that that whole acquisition ball game, and like both these acquisitions coming out of the blue, and people being surprised. So there are a few speculations around it, but there's nothing that's been happening internally, or no one's really thinking about it, and um, yeah, there's there aren't been any talks as such.
Okay.
But one thing, now that you mention, um, um, I just want to share this, that Slack and Microsoft had a tie-up to essentially make um, Slack calls be taken on Teams or something like that. But should give it a read. I can share that article with you.
Yes.
But
Cool.
it was a good pact between these two companies, and in good spirits of the whole market share, I would say. And um,
Yeah,
uh,
it's been cool to see how it's really developed to an ecosystem, where
yeah,
these apps are, everybody's integrating with each other pretty well. So that's good
true,
to see.
true, true, true.
I think that's very healthy for
Yeah,
the whole market. Yeah.
yeah. I think maybe let's not call it a tie-up, but like integration is a good word.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah,
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 great. That's cool. Yeah, so actually, I'm curious if you're can maybe speak more about what you do at Slack.
yeah.
Just your day-to-day job,
Sure.
and just yeah, give us an inside view to like your role and your team and how are things.
Cool. So I'm in a data infrastructure team at Slack, which is a part of a whole group, which is data engineering. So what we build is like infrastructure for our machine learning teams, our platform teams, our data analysis and marketing teams. For example, like you would think of like company metrics, like giving like day-to-day metrics about daily active users, weekly active users, how much revenue did we make last week, last month, things like that. Um, these are the kind of applications that the people on top of us actually work on, and we provide infrastructure for them. And another example would be like search intelligence and ranking algorithms
Yeah.
within Slack. And what the way we use ranking is what kind of a search result you would want to be shown at the top, how should be the order of it, and then what should really appear when you do a keyword search in terms of this in with respective of this order. And yeah, that's really like a 1,000 feet overview of what what um, services we provide. And then what I do really is building infrastructure, cloud infrastructure for such kind of data applications,
Mm.
um, um, making Airflow clusters available to to the developers about this, making Hadoop clusters and EMR clusters essentially available, making scooper pipelines available to the customers essentially. For the audience who don't know Scooper, essentially what Scooper does is it scoops the data out of our whole databases, and really shorts it into a few chunks, and makes it like ETL readable. And then what really goes into our ETL pipelines is like small chunks of formatted data backups of our databases into our ETL pipelines. So yeah, that's one thing about the pipelines. And essentially once the data enters in pipelines, they are really into like um, small diffs, what you would have given a 24-hour cycle. and then you perform your MapReduce activities on this, your ML modeling on these to essentially generate meaningful data, do experimentation, uh, gather metrics, do feature experimentation, essentially, for example, around pricing or new features that have been released, things like that, how are users reacting towards it, and yeah, that's the kind of work that I'm involved in, and
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean,
yeah.
that's actually pretty similar to what I worked on at
Mhm.
Square. So, data infrastructure and
Really,
replication as well, and all of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So it's kind of cool because Square is also it's a little different. It's a lot of financial data, and
uh-huh,
so it's a lot of, and we used MySQL for a lot of things.
yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty similar. So I guess dealing with a chat platform, is a lot of chat messages, or is it more generic analytics data that you're dealing with?
So I would say it's divided into a few portions here and there. So there's analytics, which I would say 30 to 40%. There's search and intelligence, which is again 30 to 40%.
Okay, and
And then
that's
there is
going to be
like
more of the data science, right? So search and intelligence.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And then there's like remaining portions wherein like we do Spark job analysis uh, for for essentially our um, experimentation experimentation features and things like
Hmm.
that.
That's
Uh,
cool. So that's data science as well.
yeah, yeah.
But
But I personally don't deal with the doing data science or machine learning
mhm.
in like my day-to-day job. Um, um, but yeah, I mean, we are a team that constantly keep in touch with what these people are up to and what they really require from the infrastructure, what kind of features help them like analyze the cluster health, monitoring around it, um, what kind of alerts do they want to see based on a pipeline failure or a DAC failure in Airflow, and just like give a complete reliability on the Airflow UI and
Mhm.
the whole Airflow infrastructure or any MapReduce cluster that we own.
That's right. So I guess it's DevOps, right? So you're just making
Yeah,
sure that all
yeah,
of everyone at the company who uses big data for analytics and machine learning, you're making sure that their systems are reliable, right?
true,
Yeah,
true.
yeah, that's very
So
cool. It's like
yeah,
very critical work.
yeah, infrastructure and reliability for data, I would say
Yeah,
that kind of defines my job.
yeah,
Um,
that's cool. That was a great overview. I mean, I'm sure if any like students, for instance, watching would
yeah.
get a cool overview for like what is data engineering, kind of about, right? Uh, Great. So that's awesome.
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, I guess the next question is maybe like, what is your interest? Um, just your interest for skill development that's more technical. So like more for your career and so forth. Is there anything on your mind that you really would like to learn or really like to get into, or that you maybe have gotten into a little bit, just in skill development, like some new skills, maybe like as a software engineer, maybe like programming languages or.
Yeah. Well, like I've mentioned this like many times. I talk about this topic with like people around me, friends around me. Something that I really want to get into myself is the mashup that happens between the process of product designing, wireframing, and front end engineering. So I know a few bit parts of like all these three areas, but I'm not really an expert. Um, uh, like professionally speaking or academically speaking, what I've done is just maybe full stack development, and even in those times, like I wasn't like much concentrated on like getting the design part right or get like really being an expert in on JavaScript or something like that. It's something that I've picked up like last couple years is React JS, but like I mean I have to like Google like I really have to like Google most of the times when I want to jot down a particular design into an actual functioning website. So it takes me a shit ton of time.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I hate about this is like you have an idea and you can't like get it up within a week's time or so.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I really want to get better at is doing React, doing JavaScript, and like uh, um, like freestyle, like you know, um, just like full length, and don't really have to like Google every time for small things like making a dialog box or like making a grid, like making objects scrollable and things like that. They just want them to be locked in my muscle memory.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
something that I really want to get better
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, so React is great, I think, for front end because it gives you that. It's kind of flexible, so um,
at.
you can get involved with like all the libraries, and it can be overwhelming. But if you stick to just React, then yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to start making components, you know, instead of like just a bunch of HTML, you know. So that's cool.
Very
Have
true.
you used hooks
And
with React?
have I used what?
Because there's a new hooks API in the
Hooks?
newer React.
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's something you can check out actually if you're looking to
Definitely.
advance your knowledge.
Yeah.
You're familiar
That's
with
like
hooks? 'Cause that lets
webhooks
you,
with
it does like data management and it does like the effects. So after the component mounts, then you can do, you know, you maybe want to load the data from an API or something. So that would be more for
Mhm.
the interactive piece, or you know, you can do animation
Interesting.
stuff as well.
How is it different from your regular React API calls that you would make like Ajax calls to
So
your backend?
normally without hooks, you would have to use a class component. And so
Hmm.
you'd extend the React component and then you'd add
Ah,
some lifecycle methods, you know. Um,
true.
so the nice thing about hooks is it does let you make a pure functional component. And so if
Mhm.
you're a fan of functional programming, like that's for me, like that's kind of the big draw. Because it keeps things simpler for me.
Uh-huh.
I just find that if you have a lot of class methods, it's harder to reason about the code and it's a little more difficult to make your code modular. So
True.
maintainability is better with the functional components in my experience.
Oh, sounds good. Okay.
So you can check out hooks.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Well,
Uh,
you would also you also do React Native, right? I've never really gotten a chance like getting my hands dirty on React Native. I'm still in I'm still in that process of like going mobile
mm,
and really stuck onto website development right now. So um, yeah, React Native is one other thing that I want to get to.
yeah, React Native is pretty great. I mean, the thing is, it's about 80% similar with React. And so
Yeah.
you still have to worry about a lot of like mobile issues, especially you got to compile to, you know, the iOS or the Android app. And
Right.
so, yeah, I found that it's kind of tricky because you'll compile it down to the iOS code, and then you still got to do all this stuff with the Cocoa Pods and all that for iOS development. And so it's not all that seamless. It's a little bit tricky still. So actually, I've heard about Flutter from Google.
Harder.
So Flutter is supposed to be a better experience. I haven't tried it myself, but I've heard great things. So that's what I would like to use for the next mobile
Oh,
project that I work on. Actually,
oh, interesting.
might be worth checking out.
How has your React Native, if you've done it at all, like if you've done Android or iOS development before natively, how has that experience been compared to React Native?
Yeah, well, I prefer React Native actually to compared to Android
Interesting.
development, which I've done in the past, is much nicer. I have not done anything with Swift or actually even with iOS Objective C, so I cannot speak to that. You know, probably if it's one of those things where if you already learned how to make iOS apps in Objective C or Swift, then it's
Yeah,
probably pretty nice. Like you have all the workflows like muscle memory, like you said. But I
yeah,
think if you're new to things, React Native is a great place to start. Or actually, Flutter might be even better uh,
Mhm.
which is what I would want to check out. But I think even React Native is better unless you're going to go and, sometimes if you're building an app, you want it to be native for some reason, like if it's a big deal, you know. Um, but for like a side project, or if performance is not too big of a deal, I think React
Yeah.
Native, or actually Flutter, can be.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Two new things that I'm gonna check: Flutter and hooks in React.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Um, Perfect. So yeah, so I guess I am curious how the crisis has affected, just like your work and your team and everything, because it's been like
Mhm.
a huge deal. So if you could just talk about it, like what's your
Oh
experience?
yeah, yeah. So s- like March 7th, I believe, or the March 1st week, was the first week of like lockdown and like everyone working from home mandatorily. I
Mhm.
think we were doing it maybe a week before, we as in our team,
Mhm.
uh, or our org per se. Like maybe a week before, a couple of weeks before that, we were all work from home. And for me personally, I didn't realize the effects of being in a lockdown position until maybe the second week or the third week of March,
Mhm.
because I was in a weird state where I was like moving out of a house and like coming to the new place, and I was not feeling the entire lockdown effect in those days,
Mhm.
where they were really a few different phases for me, wherein I was staying in San Jose for a bit, and San Francisco, doing to and forth, and like getting all of my stuff from a couple of places that I had previously stored it to,
Sure. Right. Yeah.
and then coming in full-fledged starting second week of March in this new place. So that's when I started feeling being inside, and not really meeting people or seeing anyone else from the folks that I stay with. So last week and this week maybe has really been intense on my side, but then um, uh, like it's 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 really been hard to uh, like get my shit together and like focus on work, and help myself motivate to actually keep doing progresses, and um, so I would say I've like for this last week I've not been in like my 100% productivity mode, uh, as I was the weeks previously. And
That's right. I
it's
mean,
been
it's
different. It's been different for different people in my team, where there's this whole spectrum of people working in their own uh, um, people working in their own specialities that they work on, being locked down in the house, and the kind of work that has been um, taken as a part of this scalability challenge and this whole COVID situation. Um, yeah, it's been very random, and it's completely all right, to just like take a step back, chill in, and then do a bit of self care, and then get back on your toes to be more productive.
that's right.
And it's completely all right to work random hours. It's completely acceptable. That's what we are promoting here at Slack, and that's what we would advocate other people follow too.
Mm.
Um, like for example, like I've been giving stand-up updates at like weird hours of the day,
Mm,
and it's totally acceptable as long as the week's work gets done, and
that's right.
that's how it's been for other people too.
Yeah, that's good though. I mean, so it sounds like, your team has been able to adapt your
Yeah,
normal like work processes and just keep the same like process, but adapt it, right? So that it becomes
yeah,
more
yeah.
flexible and that
Be
people are able
flexible. Be
to
flexible.
really like, just like you said, have more flexibility for self-care or whatever they need, but
Yeah.
still keep the work going and have that process in place. So that's great.
Yeah. It's one other thing is that it's really been hard for parents,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
with kids or being around because the schools are closed around, and there's nowhere else to for the little kids to chill at, and kids started getting a bit more cranky, and it's hard to work in such an environment. So yeah. Um, yeah, feel feel a bit for them.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your experience, and it's been, yeah, it's something where it's very interesting to see how everybody is reacting to this, and
yeah,
it's a kind of a cool challenge to find out like,
very subjective, very subjective.
oh, yes, everyone is having like a different experience, and um, I do believe like a little bit of crisis helps make us stronger. That's the most positive mindset to take, and we just got to get through this the best we can. Um, so like actually, that's maybe we can talk for a minute. Like, do you have any opinions on like what maybe we should all be doing, to address this and so forth? I know you had mentioned like herd immunity in the past. Obviously,
Yeah,
that'd be great if we can get that. But what is your take? What's your take on that?
sure. So one of the I don't want to like really preach on like um, what precautions and like what should be the code of conduct in the situation,
That's
but
right.
a few
Yeah,
things that have
it's
been
important to remember that like right now there are certain like expert opinions that are
yeah,
um, from the canonical source, and so
yeah,
that's what we should all be really referring to, right?
yeah. I
Um,
guess CDC is the real good source of truth. I was just reading a few articles that a few pointers that came in from them. That's a really good read, I would say. And SF Chronicles also did have a bit of flaky pointers, but then as worthwhile a read, and then mashing up both of these source of truths to what really suits you. And something that we have been following in this house is that we are not meeting anyone apart from we are not seeing anyone apart from the three of us,
mhm.
and all we go out is for grocery, maybe for a hike or a walk or a run.
But with
uh,
social distancing, so you're really not in contact with other people during those times.
Not
The
really
only
in
time is the
contact.
grocery store that you have to be careful to
We
keep
have to be
correct social
careful.
distancing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or I
And
guess physical distancing, right? Because
physical distancing, and
that's
that's
been an interesting thing to see that like social distancing, well, we actually need social connection. So you and I are right now we're socially close, right? Because here we are sharing this like deep, like really nice conversation,
yeah,
but physically, of course, we're apart. So that's so
very
physical
true.
distancing. But yeah,
Yeah,
but it's cool to hear how your house has put in place these like good measures. That
yeah,
sounds very good. Yeah.
yeah. People have been really understanding about this. There are a few folks that I usually see time to time in San Jose, in San Francisco, and I've just been a bit vocal to them about this, and like really made it a point to make them understand that why we are doing it so. And One other thing is like social distancing in grocery, or whenever you go and whenever you go get some exercise out, just like chill, go for a chill walk. You just maintain social distancing, and people around seem seem very mature about it, very concerned about
Right.
it,
That's
and
good. Yeah.
that's a really good thing about uh, this community that I'm seeing around, and it's like followed all over the country, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
One good thing that is coming from the community, from the people, um, also. Um, um, what else? Yeah. So talking about herd immunity, essentially, herd immunity is something wherein a community, like a larger portion of the community, gets like, let me rephrase, like during a pandemic, if the disease is spreading to like a lot many humans, just through airborne, or just human to human, or through by any other like point of contacts or something. um, it's really important to cross a herd threshold for a community to be completely immune about it. So one thing, one way to cross the threshold is like 57% of the whole population or the whole community getting it, and being uh, like being vaccinated after that, or you have you have a prevention vaccine which is like just distributed to 57% of the population, and that's really the herd threshold. And after that, there are no chances of like getting the disease. So this is something that helped in SAR back in 2003, I believe, but I'm really not sure what are going to be the effects uh, of 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 this particular concept in COVID-19 situation. But
Yeah.
I've read a few articles about people saying that once you get COVID-19, you're kind of immune. So the second time you might get like a mutated version of it, which is not that harmful, maybe like COVID-12 or COVID-11 something,
Mm.
which really doesn't do any damage. But then you just get cleared of COVID-19 once you've quarantined yourself for like 14 days or something. And mm, that's one important data point to understand herd immunity.
That's right. I mean, I think it's a good concept to discuss, right, as part of the larger
Yeah,
conversation. I know that there is not, any, I guess, like conclusive evidence, right? Like that is the right, that's going to be something that's helpful, or that we can make. We can't make any policy decisions quite yet, I think. So it's
yeah,
something we have to find out, like what is needed to find out whether this is going to be viable or not. So
yeah,
we still need to understand more. Yeah, I don't know exactly the steps, but I do know that's something we should consider and see if it's something we can prove that's going to work or not. Yeah, and one thing I've been seeing is kind of this a couple different projections from different groups on. So there's basically like, if you let everybody out at once, right? So let's say during the summer we decide to lift the quarantine,
yeah,
the shelter in place order, right? So it could get bad quickly. Basically we would get to the point where the system is at max capacity, and then we're gonna face a lot of issues. Now the other option is to let people out in waves, so to speak, so
yeah,
that some people are allowed to leave and then cycle things. And this would cause instead like a different, we wouldn't have like one big peak that would overwhelm everything. We'd have kind of like these waves where we would not quite reach max capacity by the time, we're able to roll out the secondary measures such as vaccines, or, that
yeah,
some people have recovered and so forth. And then there's kind of like a final point that I found interesting. I think it's called like the hammer and the dance. And I want to link to something in the description more about this to get the facts. But the idea is to shelter in place until we have enough technological discoveries and like so forth, that once we're able to like let some people out, we can keep it under control. And so it's
mhm,
kind of like one prolonged shelter in place as
yeah,
opposed to like letting people out in waves. So it's interesting to see all these different models. I hope we can find as a society the one that makes the
yeah,
most sense.
yeah,
But yeah, we'll have to see how things develop.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Do you
anyway,
see, do you see like for for um, people to think a bit creatively about pandemics as something that could be like a side project or something, or like a startup idea of of people coming up with a few creative ways of really uh, handling such a kind of situations.
Mm.
Um, for example, like as small as are we prepared to like have the amount of ventilators that we should, what kind of precautionary measures we take to have them in supply as they're needed, or um, as simple as masks. Like I heard this story about the French government uh, basically restricted the supply of masks from a company which is in France, and because they just wanted to like not let any any point of contact like out of the country and like spread anything more in the US, which is why they just like completely restricted the supply of masks, despite of that being an American company, uh, but just falling under French jurisdiction.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the what the situation you're describing. So maybe like one more time summarize.
So um, I mean, like just like thinking about possibilities that people would could come up to really sustain this kind of a pandemic, because we've never really had such such an intense one before, even if it was swine flu or SARS, or before that, um, in like mm, um, history ages, like having malaria and plague. They haven't gotten like so worse before. So, what are the real creative ways that you come up with to handle situations like that?
Right,
I
right,
mean,
right.
that it doesn't go to a situation where a particular country has to stop a supply to another country.
Yes, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is tricky. Like, in my opinion, the supply chain that we do have on Earth is kind of seems like a bottleneck for us.
Yeah,
Um, so right now, what we have is meant for like normal activity, right? And so it does not support this kind of like special cases where, there is an extreme increase in like the need, and that's a factor. It's like kind of related to how markets work. And so in the free market, you have supply and demand, and that's what sets the price. And then you have production to meet the demand. So one thing that I think we need to think about is like, how can we change, like from a government level and from an economic level, how do we change how supply chains work and are incentivized
yeah,
such that we can actually produce the supply needed for these kind of special scenarios that can occur? And it probably is not just health crises, but there's probably several other types of black swan events that can occur that we should be prepared for. And I think from the supply chain perspective, um, and it could be like natural disaster, or there could be other things. So it's something to think about, like how can we change the way it works? And it might be from the government. So basically saying that certain products and industries might be more regulated.
yeah,
And basically we would just say that we're going to allocate some money or some resources to hold reserve supplies, right?
yeah,
And I do think that's like one thing we can do in the future.
yeah.
And I don't know, I don't see that occurring. So it's something that like I really hope we can develop and produce better solutions for. It's something I'll be thinking about a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. One other crazy idea that I was thinking to bring in over here is your concept of decentralized government. Maybe that's one model to think about how how effectively a decentralized government could handle a pandemic to sustain their own local bodies. And
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. I mean, so at the end of the day, right, like organization occurs in a decentralized way. So um, it's really like, and like social movements and things like that, they're very interesting to study and understand how like, um, yeah, for instance, I'm like interested in and like participate a bit in certain online communities. Like I guess Less Wrong is kind of famous. It's like for uh, yeah, like clear thinking and like rationalism. Like how do
Mm-hmm.
you how do you be rational? It's kind of like, so how do you be less wrong? Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so it's been interesting to see how some like loosely organized groups around like topics of interest
Yeah.
have organized a little bit toward these kind of topics and like um, and things like that. Because I think there is like a lot of opportunity there for people who organize in these like larger collections of special interest, and if there is any leadership there, how they can share information and like help people to take action in an effective way. Um, yeah, so I it's definitely something that we should do more of rather than relying on these like centralized governments to do everything for us,
Yeah.
because just right now, like I'm sitting here and if there's something to do, like if we get like hundreds of thousands of people to donate $5 or $50, and we knew that that was directly going to help produce like a ventilator or a mask, that would be great. It's just right now we don't have that level of organization, so this is like a big calling, like
Yeah.
can we figure out how to make that happen?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's very interesting.
Cool. Yeah. It's
Hopefully
kind
we
of
can
sums
come
it
up
up.
with some good solutions. But I feel like my hour a day is not gonna do it by itself. So let's see what happens.
True, but like you could lay some foundational work.
That's true. Like yeah. So do you have any ideas? Like what might we do? What's the best way we can? Yeah, like with a couple spare hours per week, what could we do, right?
Hmm. It's an interesting topic. Um, well, one thing is that uh, like people are just helping out in their surroundings with like all sorts of things. Like for example, a colleague of mine who lives in Dallas mentioned when we were facing this shortage of sanitizers and soap and like veggies and like meat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Dallas didn't really have that kind of a problem back there. It's like a couple of hours drive from here, and he was just ready to help, like ready to offer his services. That's very sweet of him, but like I just thinking of like reapplying this to this whole decentralized concept. And many people in the community within themselves just take this initiative of uh, of of um, um, providing their services, and there could be a local governing body over this that
Yeah.
essentially has a few eyes on who does what and who's ready to help, and uh, how do we make this a sustainable thing in terms of money and in terms of their time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's
Yeah,
actually interesting you brought that up. So, on a
yeah.
previous call here that we did, so my friend Valentinus actually is working on an app that would
Hmm.
help. So the whole concept of the app, right, is just it's kind of targeted to this crisis,
Yeah,
but it's if everybody in the community downloads and uses the app, they can share what they need. And this could
yeah,
be that an elderly person doesn't want to leave the house and they would like groceries delivered or something, and maybe that
yeah,
service can be provided by someone else in the community. So it's
yeah.
really just a volunteer network from an app. That's the whole concept, especially for specific needs that could occur during this crisis. So I think
True.
that's a really cool project. So that's something I'll be following up with him. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, maybe it's possible to get involved some way and help with that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
There are
yeah,
good requests and like like generous offering um, on the neighborhood app. Which I just forget the app's name. It's neighbor something. It's
mm.
neighborhood or something, or neighbor talk or something, wherein like you just
I know like there's next door. Is it next door?
next door. Sorry, yeah, next
Yeah.
door.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So people just are being generous on that app. uh, like making good delicacies because they have nothing else to do. They're just like making good food recipes and just like offering the neighbors to uh, like coming in and while maintaining social distance, but like try to like just taste this sangria that I made, or
That's cool.
an apple pie that I made, or bruschettas that I made, or things like that. And
Well, now you're making me hungry. It sounds great, though. I have to get on there and see if anyone from our community is
yeah,
cooking.
yeah, you should try it. You should try.
We'll see how we can help out. Maybe there's something. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
cool. Well, that's great. I mean, that's very cool. I mean, yeah, that's great conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Well, we've been going pretty well here. I suppose we can wrap it up. Is there anything else on your mind? Um,
Hmm.
maybe you want to talk about your cooking, how that's been going.
I've been cooking a bit often these couple weeks,
Right.
so it's definitely been a change in my lifestyle right now because last 8 months, 9 months, I've never actually done some intense cooking, but
Mm.
this week it was papaya salad a day, then
Oh,
sangrias, margaritas,
are you
then
sharing them on
made
Nextdoor, or that's just
pineapple now,
okay?
just with the people I live with,
Yeah,
and
that's
just
very
like
nice.
try to have like cozy dinners, just breakfast times. Um, so yeah, we made pizza from scratch with like pizza dough and all. I've never done that
That's
before.
very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
is it
beer
good?
cake.
Like, how's the homemade pizza compared to like, you know, how does your homemade pizza compare to like a restaurant? How did you like it?
Well, it was as good as the that place we had in Soma. It's called what is that?
Street pizza?
Extreme Pizza. Extreme
Yeah,
Pizza.
shout
It's
out.
as good. I don't really like to brag about it, but then I
Hey, if
really
it was
felt
good,
it
it
was
was
close
good.
to
You
Railroad.
loved it.
It was close to our favorite pizza.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
We might try to make a pizza or something out over here. That's a good idea. We were already thinking maybe to make our own bread or do something like that. We got a bag of flour now.
Yeah, so one of my roommate actually specializes in making flatbreads, and
Mm.
she's taken some cooking class or something, and we were actually thinking of like doing weekend thing wherein like we could make different sorts of yeast and flatbreads and um, really get into that maybe. Yeah, so mm, well, I'm just hoping that this stabilizes soon and I could
Mm.
have some more people taste some of the recipes that I've learned.
Yeah,
Yeah, just being a
great. We'll
pleasure.
have to catch up when all this is over and do
Yeah,
something.
for sure, for
Um,
sure.
so here's a question. Like, have you read any good books lately? Is it something you're?
Good books lately. The thing is that I've really gotten into screenplay writing. So um, that's one of my hobbies that I really wanted to pick up these days.
Mhm.
And then what I've been doing is like reading a lot of like Stanford virtual courses, like taking a few insights from there about like what screenplay writers that uh, I should look forward to, or what kind of work uh, that would really help me devising a mystery scene or a suspense scene,
Mm.
or like a few tricks of like making the audience hooked onto a particular scene, essentially of like you have those levels wherein like for example um, some of the actors and characters in the scene know what's happening, but some of them don't know, and then the story progresses. uh, so the real gist, something that a few actors would know, a few actors won't know, and there's this suspense building that is happening. But at a point of time, maybe the audience of the scene knows all of it, and they're just intrigued, like um, um, when is the suspense going to be break down to the few actors that don't know about the whole backstory about the scene, and then it progresses. So how to build such a kind of a scene, how to write um, 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 screenplay for such a kind of a thing. So I've been looking at works done by Ridley Scott and Tarantino, David Fincher, things like that. And um, uh, yeah, I couldn't like really call it like a novel reading, but then I've been just reading one of things from here and there, studying courses, um, reading outlines of like example scripts, things like that. I don't really want to publish um, um, what I'm thinking, but then I just for now like it's just a hobby. So
That's
like I
awesome.
just want to like write like maybe 5 to 6 scenes and be happy about it. That's all. Like
Yeah.
cooking. I don't want to be a real chef.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. So like, what might be one, are there any scenes from like Ridley Scott or Tarantino? Like that's a big one, right? Like a lot of interesting elements there. Is there something that that really
So
caught your attention
I'll,
that you like?
yeah, to be specific, I'll tell you what genre I'm looking for. So yeah, these are really great people to like follow and look forward to. But the kind of genre that I'm looking for is um, um, like some kind of a protagonist, and they're trying to explore themselves in their lives uh, in 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 a big city for a good career, or like just like uh, exploring themselves as their personal selves. So really looking in the genre of like um, a specific set of Woody Allen movies, which would be Annie Hall or Manhattan. The way he's really explored the Diane Keaton characters in every movie, and there's another recent movie which kind of follows what Woody Allen does. It's called Frances Ha. So very similar work. Again, a female protagonist trying to explore herself and being very socially awkward um, about um, about herself, and like um, really making an attempt to like fit into her social circle, uh, get her feedback, uh, like get her get her shit back on track, and um, um, really make it through, and really make her point, really make herself like portray um, 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 to the people she cares the most about. And I'm kind of, yeah, looking to write a few similar scenes in this genre. And I have a kind of a story about a few experience I've had, and I'm really trying to pen them down. But then how exactly a scene is supposed to be made, I'm kind of taking lessons from all of these people's work. But the genre, if you're really asking me about like what kind of scenes that I want to write, it's really this genre where
Yeah.
um, um, you're really trying to find yourself. Yeah.
That's cool. And so like how are you actually learning about this? Are there any like online courses in particular? Like I'm just
Yeah.
curious about technically like
I'll,
you just Google
I'll,
it or is it like
no,
a
no,
master
I'll,
class?
I'll get to two books that I'm referring to.
Okay, great.
Well, these are the courses.
Cool.
Uh, so Stanford Continuing Studies 2020.
Mm-hmm.
These are winter courses, and the course that I'm referring to is called The Great Directors of 21st Century. Is this worth? Is this readable?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And I can even put a
And
link
then,
to the
yeah,
video description.
another thing is this. But what really caught my attention is one other. You should really highlight this course because I'm in love with this course, and I've been like looking at like a few video clips on this course, which is called 10 Great Films, 10 Great Filmmakers. Okay, now GQ is really being pokey.
The cat is cute. That's great. Okay, very cool. So these are online courses as well. This is the
So
syllabus.
the thing is that it would have been really good if I would like attend them in person at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
But since the situation, they've made all the courses virtual.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's always a pleasure to like take courses in Stanford. I've done that before. I think I've told you about this. I've taken design thinking
Yeah, that's right.
previously at Stanford. Um, and yeah, it's just a pleasure to like sit in like a diverse crowd, which kind of comes from every other profession. They're not really like technical Silicon Valley people, but come from like various different backgrounds. Like some would come from business, some would like just have a passion of like uh, doing something in design or doing something with their scripts. Could be anything, doing something with UX, but they have their idea of their own, like don't really have to be like computer scientist or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fun to take courses with such people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. Great. Well, good luck with the screen, with the scenes. Like, I hope you can make 6 good scenes you're happy with. That's a good goal. Like,
Cool. Thank you.
yeah, best
Thank
of
you.
luck. Um, cool. If you ever do want someone to read it, I'm always open. But if you want to keep it hidden, that's great too. So whatever, as long as you're happy with
Well, let's see. Maybe you could get me high or something someday, or get me drunk someday. I'll read out to you.
it. Okay. Sounds great. Perfect. So, um, all right. Well,
Cool.
thanks. It's been great having you on. Yeah. Is there
Same
anything
here.
else you want to wrap up with?
One thing that I wanted to show you. Wait a sec.
Yes, please.
Just a sec. Give me a sec.
Yeah, for sure. We can also make cuts, so we'll do a fast take on this one.
Let's end it up on this note. Dress
Oh
code.
yes, you have a Tres Comas,
Yay.
the namesake. So we are the Three Commas Club, and
So,
actually, I have to take a shot every time that every time I make a video. Can you imagine? I just came up with this idea, but this is perfect. So
perfect, right?
wow, you should do a shot right now.
Right now,
No, only if you
we
want
have one.
to.
They
No,
have
I
one.
don't have this bottle. I only have vodka.
Okay. Let
But
me
would you like me to do a shot with you, or what's your? Okay, I've gotten roped into this. Okay, channel. We're we gotta keep it going. Tequila is the thing. Okay, we have a group activity. So this is Stolichnaya. It's
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Sounds good.
the sister one for this. I have not shot glasses, so I have only. That's my shot.
Yeah, it's really being a caveman in Sea Ranch, but I really like the kind of plates you guys have, plates and cutleries.
And that's right. We put a lot of effort into the interior design to make sure it's cozy and nice.
Yeah,
So,
cool.
all
Well,
right. Well,
cheers.
cheers. Thanks for having you on.
to-
Okay. Oh, that takes the edge off.
Yeah.
How is it, by the way? I haven't tried it yet, believe it or not.
You haven't tried Descomas? What the fuck?
I
It's
know,
really
I
good.
know.
It's
All
not
right,
that
I'm gonna go buy it right now. Like that's what I'm gonna do. Right after this.
yeah. Well, it's smooth and you really don't need any fruit after that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I can see that you've had it no chase, so that's a good sign. Great.
Well, yeah, it's been a pleasure. Um, and yeah, we should meet soon after this stabilizes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, so to wrap it up, yeah, I guess let us know. Is there any? Do you have any links or something you want to leave people with to find out more about you? Like, would you like your LinkedIn here? Or
Yeah, I'll share my LinkedIn and I'll share some links that I've mentioned.
hmm
Uh,
And Slack is hiring,
right
right? So we'll
here
make
for
sure to put a link.
for sure. Yeah, Slack links and things that I've been doing, maybe my personal projects or something. Or
Yeah, great. That'd be cool.
yeah, yeah,
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for having you. I'll stop the recording and then we'll.
cool.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thanks, Shreedar. So.